Good afternoon, and thank you for your time today. The rate of technology and just listening to all the great pitches all day today is really incredible. I want to talk about ecosystems and how you take some of these concepts, these ideas, and bring them to success. When you talk about the Internet of Things, it really starts with the things, the devices on the edge, the sensors, the compute, the connectivity, the gateways, the storage, the analytics, the machine learning. It's a pretty extensive stack. And as a startup, you're focused on what are the areas that I'm going to focus on and what are the areas that I need to go work with a set of partners on. And so really the goal of the conversation I want to have today is, what does that ecosystem look like, right? How do you pick the right partners? How do you get to scale? And to do that, I'm really going to take you through a set of examples of kinds of things that you've seen out there and really a little bit behind their success. You guys should recognize this. The name's on there. It's Skybell. Skybell was a startup. It was an idea about 3 years ago. And today it is one of the largest smart doorbell companies in the world. And we had been working with Skybell for some time. Started with this idea of, hey, Aero Electronics, we're a component supplier. They bought components from us to build what they wanted to. Very soon they realized they couldn't scale. And part of that scaling was, I need to build more units. I don't have the manufacturing capability. I don't understand logistics. I need credit capabilities, revolving credit, for example, so that I can scale. And again, when you talk about that startup, that concept, and saying, how am I going to go from this idea to execution, the ecosystem of partners that you pick becomes critical to that success. Taking another example, forgot I had added this slide. I think most of you have seen this. And the reason I put this here is, look, all of you guys represent startups. And the sponsors in the middle are companies, as I look at the logos, have been around. They're in the other 48% that have survived a lot of the shifts because they've been innovating. But for the startups, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And we're working with a lot of startups today. What we see in the marketplace and how we engage with these companies, I quite often tell our customers who say, name some of the customers you're working with. And while some of them are right here in this room, what I find very interesting is some of them are names that you've never heard of because they're not household names yet. They're companies that are up and coming. Some of them are going to launch in January. Some of them have recently launched. They're small companies. They're not necessarily household names, but we sit behind and help enable them. So this is another example of a company that we've been working with from, again, that ecosystem. It was a set of entrepreneurs who said, hey, we've got an idea. There's upcoming legislation around beef and how that beef is treated before the cattle is slaughtered for production. And they had an idea, but they didn't know how to implement the electronics. They didn't know how to work the logistics. And again, these are hard problems. These aren't some things that you, as a startup, can just say, here, I can figure out logistics globally, for instance. Listening to some of the pitches earlier today, when you talk about that global scale, you have to think about how are you going to get there. So, when you look at this customer that's going to go public in January, they're talking about a target market of 1.4 billion assets, and these assets are going to be monitored to improve their health and to treat them better. But again, they had the concept, but they didn't have the hardware expertise. They didn't know how to design it, manufacture it, how to distribute it across the globe, and ultimately kind of think about the environment along the way. How are you going to recover the value, right? You're adding electronics on the ear of a cattle. How do you safely and sustainably take that asset back out and dispose of it? And so they're thinking about this in a very 360 holistic way. And how do we go help companies like that? Sticking with the theme of agriculture and cattle, another customer, this one is public, is somebody who basically had an idea. And I'll actually have a video that I'm going to roll here in a second that tells the story actually better than I can. And these guys, again, had an idea but didn't know how to execute on it. And let me go to the next slide and roll the video.
My grandfather bought this place, and he improved it and passed it on to my father. And now it's my chance to pass it on to my kids with hopes that someday they'll continue to improve it and pass it on to their kids. I believe we purchased about a 100-acre farm. We had 8 cows when we got there, and my dad grew it up to about 270 cows, and now we're milking about 1,000 cows. My dad always told me, if you take better care of those animals and keep them more comfortable, then they'll take better care of you. The bolus is a temperature monitor that resides in the stomach of a cow. When the temperature is above normal to the point where she needs help, then either by text or by email, this cow can communicate with me and let me know, hey, I need your help and I need it now. When we finally met Arrow, we found a company that was no longer trying to take our ideas and our technology away from us, but trying to help us put it together and help us make something that we could sell. This technology has helped me take care of my animals better than we have ever taken care of them before, and helps us to be more profitable and more competitive in the marketplace so that we can look forward to passing our farm from generation to generation.
And so that gives you an idea of sort of how we work with customers. And as you look at that example and dozens like that, you see that our focus is really enablement and kind of being that partner in that ecosystem. And again, I want to emphasize the word ecosystem because it's not just about people who are creating the things or people who have the idea. Sometimes people are coming from a different part. A lot of references to machine learning, AI, which generally has compute requirements. And as you look at privacy, you don't necessarily, I think there were some references to video and AI and recognition. You don't necessarily want to take all those images, push them to the cloud, mainly because you got a lot of bandwidth considerations there. You want to analyze that data locally for privacy as well as for faster turnaround. And working with companies who are doing things like that to say, how do you accelerate that on the edge, right? How can you use FPGA technologies that many of you are quite familiar with, some of you may not be, but how do you use that? A customer that is using those same technologies to accelerate a lot of the traffic on the internet today with a daughter card that goes into a server. Again, you're not necessarily talking about a server, but you're saying, how do I take my server, but how do I further optimize it? And just thinking of the different ways you can look at this ecosystem. This one is really interesting. We talk about smart cities, smart buildings. There's so many assets out there today. Buildings that aren't monitored. If you have a new building and it has the latest Siemens or Honeywell control systems, that's great. but there are a lot more older buildings than there are new buildings. Airports are a good example. And, you know, a lot of talk about and a lot of great ideas about travel. But, you know, the airport is that mall. How do you make sure that the environment is safe and secure? How do you drive a better customer experience? How do you drive a better operational experience? How do they know what's happening at the gate? Today, it's very visual. You know, there is no data, there's no telemetry. Can you instrument it to provide, you know, more insight? Can you use it to improve on-time performance? You know, if the water that goes into an airplane, if that water hose gets frozen because somebody didn't put it away properly, that means that flight's going to be delayed. And it's a very, very simple thing. Close the cabinet door, and if somebody forgets, you know, you've got a 2-hour delay, right? So how do you use technology to do that? And in this case, it's working with a client who actually knew nothing about electronics. You know, they had relationships with an airport. And they said, hey, we want to solve for this problem. What are the kinds of electronics that we need to monitor and sense all these different types of things that are out there? How do we do it so that it fits within the budget and within the operational environment that they have, right? So it's not introducing more siloed systems, but really integrating into their existing systems that are in place at the airport. I want to talk a little bit about crowdfunding. Many of you may know these facts, but you know, crowdfunding has been growing. You know, the crowdfunding platforms like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and some of you probably have, you know, participated on those platforms. And you can see that the amount of money that's coming through these crowdsourcing platforms has been increasing over time. And you know, we're at that cusp where the local screen went out, but we're at the point where the crowdfunding is going to exceed the venture capital investment in a lot of companies. We're at that cusp today. And the fact that the regulations that were just passed that gives you micro ownership is only going to accelerate that crowdfunding. But crowdfunding can be interesting too. Anyone recognize the cat ear headphones? You guys know what this is? No? It was actually a very, very popular campaign on Indiegogo, probably one of the most successful ones they had at the time. And these two young ladies had this great idea saying, if I'm listening to music, I want to be able to push a button and have that music play out. Now, not something that I would necessarily want to use, but there were a lot of people on Indiegogo who said, love that, I'm going to plunk down how much ever money so that I can go share my music and my experience with others. Successful campaign, they had a lot of money, and they knew nothing about electronics. They got on a plane, you know, went to Shenzhen, said, okay, we're going to go figure this out. We're going to go figure out what partners to pick and how to do the design. 6 months going from one place to the other, pulling their hair out. They go back to Indiegogo saying, hey, look, you know, we thought we could execute on this. We were mistaken. We want to give the customers their money back. And Indiegogo's like, time out. You're not doing that. You know, this was the most successful campaign. We cannot have you return the money. They said, let us introduce you to Brookstone. Brookstone's like, yeah, we can help you with that. You know, they make gadgets. You guys see Brookstone at airports all the time, and malls, and obviously the catalog. And I think these headphones are actually on the catalog for December. And you know, they worked with Brookstone to design, manufacture, And ultimately, if you go to Brookstone today, there's a Indiegogo branded section in their store because they're now taking products. It's like the as seen on TV. It's the Indiegogo section at Brookstone. And so again, the point being, it's having the right ecosystem that helps you bring these kinds of solutions to market. Have you guys seen this before? Anyone? The coolest cooler? Got one of them? Not yet. Anyone else? Any guesses as to how much this thing raised on Kickstarter? Very close, 13 million. It's got a blender, a solar charger, Bluetooth, speaker, it slices, it dices, it's got a cutting board. Who wouldn't want this, right? The guy put it out there. Here's the offer. For $225, you get all the swag. And campaign closed, starts looking at, okay, how am I going to build this? Starts pulling the BOM together, the bill of materials, and realizes it's $400. Oops. But this is where it can go wrong, right? Where it's a great idea, you get great funding, but the idea has not been vetted out. How do you get your ideas vetted out early in the design process? As a startup, again, you're focused on certain things, you have certain expertise, but you need to reach to a broader ecosystem to go help you execute and succeed. And so, a lot of these customers, what is it that they have in common? And not all of them, but a lot of them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the company that I represent, Aero Electronics, for a few minutes to kind of tell you what we do. How many of you have heard of Aero Electronics? Okay. That's a very small percentage. But that's not surprising, by the way. We're the largest company that you've not heard of. We've been around since 1935, 81 years. Started at Radio Row in New York, selling radio kits, probably along with Radio Shack back then. We know where Radio Shack is in Chapter 11, and we're actually innovating and growing all the time. So this is really us. We've been innovating and growing for the last 81 years, helping customers. We sit in the middle of ecosystems. We're not necessarily branding ourselves and products as Aero. We sit behind, we enable, we nurture, we help companies succeed. A little bit about the company. I'll just kind of build this out. Really six business units. The first one is Global Components. This is where it started. Compute, store, sensing, active and passive components. Anything that would go into an electronic product, we carry from great partners such as Renesas, NXP, Qualcomm. The list is broad. And so that's a large part of our business. We're a Fortune 119 company, with $24 billion in revenue, and about 60% of that is that business unit. Our Intelligent Systems business unit is really about the high mix, high complexity, low volume type of business. It's about embedded computing. So when you think about an MRI machine as an example, there's a compute element to an MRI machine. And for some of the people who make those machines, we help enable that capability. Or think of an ATM, the embedded compute within an ATM. Somebody like Diebold who makes those, doesn't necessarily have all the capabilities. We partner with them, we enable them. Our enterprise computing business is a software and hardware distribution business. So this is where you're buying server, storage, networking, either on-premise or in the cloud. So again, you name the players. We have distribution agreements in business that we do, and that's about a $9 billion business for us. Value recovery, I had alluded to that earlier, is really thinking about how are you designing for the environment? How are you designing that IoT device so that you can safely and sustainably dispose of it? If you design it in a way that the battery's somehow embedded in a way that takes 16 steps to take out versus it's designed so you can pop it out and get rid of it quickly and safely in 2 different areas as you're recycling, that reduces your cost over time, right? So thinking about that design perspective very, very early in the cycle. And then the systems integration, which is really started with a service model, right? When you talk about IoT, and it's really a journey, right? You're starting with the edge devices that are, talking through gateways, talking through 2 cloud solutions. You have to integrate them. You have to take that tier 0, tier 1 call when someone says, hey, my device is broken. Are you thinking about that? How is that service going to be provided? What's the ecosystem of partners that can do that to provide the customer service? And I saw some references to customer service today. But for every single business out there today, every single one of you who did a pitch today or is going to do a pitch, how are you going to address the customer service aspect of it? Right? So again, things to think about. And then last but not least is Aero Digital Services. About 75% of the electronics engineers who are designing products land on an Aero property today. They're not all branded Aero, but this is really sort of the power that we have, where we have bought these assets in the United States, in North America, in Asia, and a lot of the places that people go as they're building their devices, there's a set of digital tools. There's tools that help you understand parts life cycle. How are you designing for the life cycle? Are you sure that part that you've designed in is going to be available 6 months from now or 6 years from now? What kind of life cycle are you predicting for those devices that you're building, for those of you who are building those devices? So again, a broad set of capability that we bring to the table. So in conclusion, really want to talk about Indiegogo. We have a partnership with them, but whether it's Indiegogo, whether it's one of you, whether it's us or it's somebody else, just remember that you can't do this on your own, right? It's a team sport. You're working with the right partners. Make sure you choose the right partners so that you can take your idea and go from the concept and go all the way to success, that you can grow the business and you're focused on the right elements of your business, whether that's marketing, channel development, product design, analytics. You can be the master of all. Startups have the problem where they're not like an Apple or a Google. They're so vertically integrated with near limitless resources. So picking the right partners really becomes critical so that you don't have the case of the coolest cooler where, great idea, clearly people wanted it, but couldn't execute on it easily. They had some challenges. They worked through it, apparently. But again, starts with the idea. Get it, going through Indiegogo and our relationship with Indiegogo, you can reach out to engineers and validate your ideas, validate the bill of materials. And we also flash fund some companies along the way. So again, this has been an interesting experience for us as we started working with the startups and the the makers coming out of the Indiegogo world. But ultimately, we're also learning a lot from them in terms of how we can work better with them. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the pitches that are coming up next. Philip?